hear from Eden now about the phase-in and about, I just wanted to mention that I was like very impressed with your presentation yesterday. If you had debated Donald Trump, you would have been the Republican nominee. It was real, the thing is, we were in Edgemont yesterday and we were speaking to people in Southern Greenville and if people had concerns and, I think at the end of the meeting, most people actually felt that they had a better understanding of the process and, we got some thank you letters and I just thought you did a really excellent job, so I wanted to commend you.
Thank you.
So basically, we've been working on the phase-in legislation. Yesterday at the meeting, actually, there were two other suggestions that were made. One is actually, I thought was a really good idea. Somebody mentioned that the STAR only pertains to school districts, but I'm going to be reaching out to state lawmakers and we thought that maybe we should ask for communities that are reassessing if they would apply STAR for town, county, and fire taxes as well. That's another way of basically helping people. So it's just a proposal that if the state would want to do something to help, would make the STAR more meaningful and exemptions greater. We also have on the agenda today legislation, this is not a phase-in, that would increase exemptions for senior citizens. Right now, you have to have a $37,000 income, and the last time that was increased was like years ago, like over 6 or 7 years ago, maybe longer. So tomorrow on the agenda, we're going to be encouraging the state to increase the exemption amount, and maybe you could give us an update on the phase and how it differs with, with the phase-in that we had a public hearing on.
Okay. So, may I just back up for 1 second and talk about the senior exemption?
Right.
It's been about 7 or 8 years since the legislature has increased the amount, and historically they've listen to me. Historically, they've increased the amounts every year by whether it's $1,000 or some allocated amount. They haven't done it again in like 8 years. So not just because we're in the middle of a reassessment, but I just think it's very difficult for anybody to live here, regardless of age, for $37,000 a year. So we're asking the legislature to at least increase that. We're asking for $50,000. See what happens.
And what type of exemptions could people get?
Well, the way that legislation works, it's based on a sliding scale. So actually, the less money you make, the higher the exemption amount, and it goes from a 0% exemption, which means you don't get it, to a 50% off your property taxes, and that's applicable to
as your income decreases.
As your income decreases, your exemption increases. Right. Okay. That is applicable to town, county, and school taxes. So it's a huge savings for the seniors. The other thing that we're talking about, and probably came in a little bit late, I apologize, I wasn't sure if you had mentioned it, but one I wanted you to know is I have a meeting with Sandy Gallup tomorrow and to discuss some of these things, asking her support, as well as she's chairman of the real property tax, but she also represents the town of Ossining, who's in the middle of the reassessment as well. We were talking briefly last week about working on a condominium law. I'm not sure how far that's going to get, but we don't have any details. It was just thrown on the table, so I'll keep you posted about that as we make progress. As far as the phase-in is concerned, then Section RPTL 1904, that existing legislation does not have anything to do with this proposal that we've been talking about. And again, I'll be with Assemblywoman Gallup tomorrow to work out some more of the details on it. It would be 3 years. It would only be a phase-in for increased. And one of the very different aspects of this as opposed to 1904 is this is a phase-in of property taxes. So this does not affect our reassessment, acknowledgement, are 100%. We will still get exemptions will be implemented at what they're supposed to be for seniors and vets and firemen, so it doesn't affect that side. We'll still get our maintenance aid. So we're good on the assessment side. This will be a phase-in of anybody's property taxes that have increased from prior to the reassessment to the proposed now. Only the increases. All the decreases will go into effect immediately as of June of 2016. Do you want me to get into some of the details we've been talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. What is on the table at the moment, subject to change, is this would impact 1, 2, and 3 family homes, residential, 1, 2, and 3 family homes, must be a resident's primary residence. They must be receiving the STAR exemption, either the basic or the enhanced. The phase-in runs with the owner. So if the property sells, the taxes get automatically just where they're supposed to be. There will be an application process, no fee for the application. There will be an interior inspection will be required. I'll explain that in a second, and a certificate of occupancy, whether it's a temporary CO or just a regular CO. The reason for the interior inspection through the application process is we want to ensure that if somebody forgot to take a building permit out and did some interior work, and that's why their assessment went up as much as it did, we don't want that to benefit for an additional 3 years. So that would, the building department and I would work closely together to make that determination.
Other people would not be eligible for the phase-in?
Would not be eligible for the phase-in, correct. Nor would people be eligible for the phase-in because we're basing this on property taxes. So for example, if you just bought your home from a senior citizen who received a senior exemption and an enhanced STAR and a fireman's exemption, and you bought that and you lost all of those exemptions, your taxes could increase significantly. Because if a senior had a 50% exemption, your taxes could increase. You would not be eligible for this phase-in if it was due to exemption cancellations from a prior owner.
So that 1904, was that giving people a phase, a 5-year phase, and was somebody just bought the house, so they
Yes.
benefited?
Yes.
So actually, that was a negative, that law,
Yep.
that, somebody bought a house from a senior citizen, they had an exemption or a volunteer fireman, they had an exemption, they would benefit from the phase-in.
I'm understanding what you said, can you confirm?
If somebody just bought their house,
Right.
let's say you just bought your house from a senior citizen who had the exemption, under the law that we have a public hearing on.
Right.
Because prior to that, it was based on assessments.
Right.
From old to new assessments. So whether they lost the exemptions or not, it would not have benefited. 1904 would have been made that much more complicated, so they would have benefited from that. Here, they're not. So if you bought your house, like I said again, from somebody who was receiving 2 or 3 exemptions, to exempt them significantly, their taxes will go up. But under these circumstances, you're not eligible for the phase-in because you purchased it from somebody who was receiving exemptions, and now you're not.
Okay, that's pretty status quo, right?
Yes, the
That's
status,
also-
always,
Yeah.
yep, nothing new. As far as the, I just want to make sure I miss anything. Yeah, we want to ensure that it's somebody's primary residence, so, and that's the reason for, you must be receiving the STAR exemption, either the basic or the enhanced, and that they have to confirm on the application that it is in fact their primary residence.
And you also mentioned to me that we're going to be exempting condos and co-ops from it.
Yep, that's the last criteria. Again, 1, 2, and 3 family residential homes are the only ones that would be eligible. No condos, no co-ops or apartments.
Because they're over.
This would affect, the determination here would go from what your actual 2015 property taxes were to what they would have been if these numbers were in place at the time. So we won't be able to calculate how this is going to work until September 15th. Because, again, there's an application process, so if somebody applies now and they've been through the Tyler informals or me or the grievance process and whatever, and they get the reduction, for whatever the reason being, they may not need to go through this process. So we're gonna wait until September 15th if we can get the legislation passed. Wait until September 15th because then we'll know. It will actually be back to a level fund.
I had an email from somebody who wrote to me at midnight last night and we responded. He wants to say, let's say there's 1,000 homeowners, I'm just reading from his email. Let's say there's 1,000 homeowners who will meet the proposed phasing requirements, and let's guess that they will average a $3,000 tax increase per home. Does this mean that there would be a $3 million tax revenue shortfall spread over 3 years for everyone else to make up, and that the various taxing authorities will upwardly adjust the mill rates accordingly, or will the subsidy only apply to the 30% of the tax bill allocated to town and county taxes? And he said, in my example, the real impact would be $1 million spread over 3 years to be subsidized by the town at large, not $3 million. And he also wants to know how these increases would impact the town's ability to stay under the tax cap.
So this would still remain as revenue neutral. The phasing, whether there's 1,000 or 100 or 10, that would be as a compromise to 1904 to help the taxpayers. Again, we're proposing a 3-year phasing, and this would just be reallocated amongst the town entire. This would impact the property taxes for town, county, and school taxes, and fire taxes, actually, but all of the 4 taxing bodies would still remain revenue neutral.
So we're not
Just be a
subsidizing.
reallocation.
So
The
we're-
town is not subsidizing any of the other taxing jurisdictions.
Right, one of the other advantages to this legislation is that the law that we have, proposed law that we have the hearing on, there would have been, thousands of people who would sought grievances because people were getting their reductions, so they said, I want my reductions now. Under this legislation, everybody, the only people who are phasing in are the people who are going up, not the people who are going down. So I think that the number of grievances is going to be, much less.
Well, part of the problem with 1904 is that it was presented, which was incorrect. It was presented that anybody that was getting a reduction could just file a grievance application and get their reductions. So they're not part of the phase down. That was incorrect. Anybody that, if you pass 1904, that's a phase in 5 years. Whether they have increases or decreases, those are phased in for a 5-year period. So you can't file a grievance application and get it to be what it should be in the first year as opposed to the 50. It doesn't work that way. It's been determined by the Department of Taxation and Finance, Office of Real Property Tax Services, that you would be, again, my example, we have an assessment of $500,000 before the reassessment, and then after the reassessment it gets reduced to $300,000. The only challenge that you can submit is to challenge the $300,000, not the transitional assessment for the 4 years. It doesn't work that way. You go from 5, and you would challenge the 3. If you got the $300,000 reduced down to the $250,000, then you're phasing in from $500,000 down to the $250,000. That's what you're challenging. So that presentation was incorrect. It would actually be the phase down of the reduced and the phase up of the increase. That's 1904. This, what we're talking about here, is strictly anybody that complies with the requirements and just the increases.
I just wanted to mention one other thing is we have letters from the council to the real property tax services, and they basically, and there's a disagreement, with some people in the community as to whether we would be able to phase, whether you have to upfront, the amounts or not in terms of the phase-in. The state says everybody's paying most of their tax increases initially. Some of the people who were in the audience speaking said, no, that's a wrong interpretation. The benefit of this legislation, if it's approved in Albany, it is very clean. You know, if the state passes this, you know, everybody knows exactly what, you know, we're getting. If we would adopt the 1904 and base it on interpretations by citizens rather than the state, somebody takes us to court on this because they're upset with what we're doing. We don't know what a judge is going to do. So I think that if people are supporting the phasing concept, your approach, I think, makes, you know, so much more sense. You know, it's much less of a hassle. It's 100%. You know, we're complying with the assessment laws. You know, I think this is a really good. I think this is a really good approach, and I think you did a really good job.
So again, it's an opt-in program, and it doesn't affect commercial.
No, it does not affect commercial, nor condos, nor grounds, nor.
Would have been 1904 affected commercial?
Yes, it would have affected everybody. All of, that's a good point, Kevin. Section 1904, the real property tax law would have affected all properties. Condominiums, co-ops, commercial, utilities, all of them.
Right.
Why not build in some of these provisions into the resolution? Resolution is pretty much down to the ground. Basically says whatever.
No,
People can read it the way they want to read it.
I think
I
that
don't
we're.
know, if somebody.
We would be able to do that.
Especially proposed.
Well, we're going to have to get rid of it.
Right, they go on so many drawings over there, you don't know exactly. This is what you just described, this is what they're talking about.
It's our wish list.
It's a wish list.
Yes.
So none of it is actually written stone.
On the other hand, if we basically. Sure. On the other
That's not a
hand.
bad idea. That's part, because in this way we write it out.
This way, so
And they can cut it out. Right.
I think that's really good. And you know,
Yeah.
then the state basically could do whatever, you know, I mean, you know, I think all these, internal control, you know, all these controls actually would make the legislation easier to get approved because, you know, you guys thought it out and we have the the safeguards, and I think people in Albany recognize that something should be done, but they don't want abuses, so.
I would just like to acknowledge that New York State is not, to the best of my knowledge, ever done anything like this before, nor has anybody, any municipality in New York State ever adopted section 1904 of the real property tax law, and therefore there's nothing else available at this point. There are other states across the country that do have phase-in, they have tax abatements, they have all kinds of, this would be unique to New York, but it's not, the concept is not unique to the country. So, nobody's ever done anything quite like this that I know of, but they're out there. Programs are out there available.
That is great. Good. Excellent. Anything else about the reassessment that you want to mention?
Almost finished. Tyler Technology, yeah, thank you, I forgot. Tyler Technologies is still working on their informals. They have closed the appointment scheduler, and they will be working until May 7th. We'll be working here at 5 o'clock on May 7th, is the last appointment, to get the town hall back. And then at that point, it will be 3 weeks before we're trying to prepare for the assessment roll that's due June 1st. And that's when the formal process starts. But in the interim, anybody that has met with Tyler to gone through the informal process will receive a letter, an assessment change notice. After that, if you've not met with Tyler, then the letter that you've received that's all you're getting. If you receive that letter, or the letter that you have now, and you still want to pursue any further assessment review, you still have 3 more opportunities to do so.
Let me ask another question, Julie.
Not you.
Yeah, since, you know, you probably are gonna get a lot of people wanting to meet with you, Gary, you know, between January 1st and June 21st, June 1st and June 21st, do you need, the board to authorize like any additional part-time assessor, you know, staff hiring, so this way they can help, if it becomes overwhelming, at least everybody who wants to come in.
I'm sure you can say no.
Yeah, no, because I just sort of feel, no, because I just sort of feel
Just
that,
look at the numbers.
I'm thinking that might be a smart thing to do, Kevin.
yeah, I just want to make sure that, you know, everybody who basically wants to meet will have an opportunity to meet, and you're not going to be able to meet, you know, 3,000 people yourself.
Well, that's probably a good idea to just grant the approval for that. Seeing as though I lost another full-time employee who took a job in another municipality. Bad timing. Respect what they did, but bad timing for me, for us. So I'm not sure if I'm actually going to need additional part-timers, but going under the assumption that I do, depending on what happens in the next week. My phone's ringing off the hook for appointments. My deputy, Gary, and I are scheduling appointments. We're not meeting anybody under any circumstances without an appointment. 15, 20-minute slots, and we're just going through. It's unfortunate for both of us. We haven't told him yet, but we'll be working on Saturday for those, to accommodate those schedules.
Mr. Mullin.
Hi, how you doing over there? Okay. And we'll stay afterwards because we know people, are working, so that's not a problem. As far as hiring additional staff, like I said, I'm not sure if I need it, but I would never turn that down. So.
I just want to clarify something. One of those who have met with Tyler, who said they've got a change order. Is every person who met them seeing something from Tyler, whether they did change it or didn't change it?
Yes, any person that met with, or went through the informal process with Tyler will get an assessment change notice. And basically that notice is going to say, this is what your assessment was after you met with us, before you met with us, this is what your assessment is after you met with us. Change or no change, that will be represented on that letter. That letter will not show what will happen to your taxes again. That won't just, the assessment will be represented in the letter.
If there's a change in the assessment.
Correct.
Because then the assessment will change.
Mhm. Yep. So, I do have a personal issue. Yeah.
Do you want to go into executive session for like 5 minutes now to do the personnel, because this way you can get back to work on the seventh?
Yes.
Involving the employment or the employment
No. No. It's a big general employee.
It's the performance of particular people,
Yes.
specific people?
Yes.
Okay. So you can make a motion?
You make a motion.
Second.
Okay.